tortured alien princess had her crystals harvested for weapons. Only one human knew she was worth saving. The maintenance hatch creaked open with a hiss of escaping air. I pulled myself through the narrow opening, my boots landing with a hollow thud on metal grating. The station's lights flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across the corridor. My neural mods tingled at the base of my skull, transmitting data directly to my visual cortex. Numbers and warning indicators flashed across my field of vision, confirming what my employer had told me. The Ark was dying. Quantum instability readings pulsed in angry red. 12 hours until this entire research station phased out of our reality. 12 hours to get in, grab the data, and get out. I unholstered my pulse pistol and moved forward, following the station schematic projected in the corner of my vision. The silence was uncomfortable, broken only by the occasional groan of metal and the soft beep of my scanner. The first body appeared around the next bend. I crouched to examine him. No pulse weapon signature. Whatever killed him wasn't standard military issue. 5 more bodies littered the path to the central junction. Some bore signs of struggle. Others looked like they'd been caught completely unaware. Something had attacked this station, and it wasn't part of the briefing. "Maddox, you sneaky bastard," I muttered to myself. My contact had conveniently omitted this detail when negotiating my fee. A sudden drop in air pressure made my ears pop. The life support systems were failing faster than anticipated. My implants flashed a radiation warning as I approached the research sector, forcing me to inject a dose of anti-rad meds from my wrist dispenser. The door to the restricted section required a security clearance. I didn't have. I pulled a bypass device from my jacket pocket and attached it to the control panel. 30 seconds of cycling through Confederate code sequences, and the door slid open with a harsh noise. What I found inside shocked me. The chamber beyond was massive, at least 3 stories high, with a network of catwalks surrounding a central platform. Suspended above that platform, inside a shimmering containment field, floated a woman but not human. Her skin was pale lavender, embedded with crystalline formations. Her body hung limp in the field, those crystals pulsing weakly with inner light and Aetheri. I'd never seen one in person before, only in military briefings. The control panel at the base of the containment field flashed urgent warnings. System failure, imminent. Field compression accelerating. The energy barrier was collapsing inward, slowly crushing her. I approached cautiously, feeling uncertain. My instructions had been explicit. Retrieve the research data. Avoid all test subjects. Leave no evidence of intrusion. The terminal beside the containment field was still active. I accessed it, quickly typing commands. Security footage appeared, showing the woman's capture during what looked like a border conflict between Confederate forces and crystalline ships. The file listed her as Lyra Va'Sora with a string of technical specifications and test protocols too complex to process quickly. I glanced up at her suspended form, her eyes suddenly opened. Large without pupils, changing between silver and violet. We looked at each other, and I saw intelligence there. Awareness. Desperation. The station shuddered violently, throwing me against the console. Another system going critical. The containment field's instruments showed critical failure, the compression rate accelerating. Shit. 12 hours was optimistic. At this rate, I'd be lucky to have 5. I wasn't paid to be a hero. My job was simple. Get in, grab the data, get out. The Aetheri weren't my problem. They were the enemy, technically speaking, though I'd left military service precisely because I questioned that narrative. The woman Lyra watched me, her crystalline fingers twitching slightly as if trying to reach out. I accessed the terminal again, overriding safety protocols and entering the emergency release sequence. My employer was going to be pissed, but I wasn't about to watch someone being slowly crushed to death, enemy or not. The containment field flickered, then collapsed entirely. Lyra tumbled to the floor in a heap of limbs and crystal. I rushed forward, kneeling beside her. Up close, her skin emanated a cold that penetrated my gloves. The crystalline formations along her spine and joints seemed dulled, no longer catching the light. Her eyes fluttered open again, focusing on me with effort. "Why save enemy?" she whispered in broken standard, each word clearly requiring enormous effort. I checked my chronometer. 11 hours remaining. If the station's deterioration didn't accelerate further. Job just got complicated, I muttered, holstering my weapon and carefully lifting her over my shoulder. Her body was unnaturally cold and lighter than I expected, despite the crystalline formations. As we left the lab, emergency sirens began blaring throughout the station, the piercing wail spreading down empty corridors. Someone, or something, knew I'd released her. I adjusted her weight on my shoulder, and drew my pulse pistol again with my free hand. "Let's move, Lyra Va'Sora. We've got 11 hours to get off this death trap." Her only response was a faint pulse of light from the crystals along her spine. Whatever she was, whoever she was, I just made her my problem. My simple extraction job had become a rescue mission, and I had no idea if either of us would survive it. Lyra's weight moved slightly on my shoulder as I moved through the corridor, pulse pistol at the ready. The station's emergency lighting painted everything in harsh red, making the corpses we passed look even more awful. My neural mods tingled with radiation warnings. Another system failing somewhere. "Hold on," I whispered. Though I wasn't sure if she understood me, the crystals along her spine pulsed faintly in response. I ducked into a narrow maintenance passage, avoiding the main corridors. 8 hours remained before total phase-out. If the station's deterioration stayed on schedule, which seemed increasingly unlikely. The arc groaned around us, metal stress fractures appearing along the walls as quantum instability played havoc with the structural integrity. Lyra stirred, her voice barely audible. "Down, please." I hesitated, checking my scanners for immediate threats before carefully lowering her to the floor. Her iridescent eyes focused on me with more clarity than before. "Thank you," she said, her standard more fluid now, "for freeing me." "Can you walk?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She braced one hand against the wall and pushed herself upright, her movements graceful despite her weakness. "With assistance." I offered my arm, surprised when her crystalline fingers wrapped around my forearm. The initial cold of her touch gradually warmed where our bodies connected. "We need to keep moving," I said, checking my chronometer. 3 hours until we reach the docking bay at this pace. She nodded, and we began a slow, awkward walk through the maintenance corridor. Her steps grew more confident with each passing minute, though she still leaned heavily against me. "Your name?" she asked, as we navigated around a fallen support beam. "Rook Garrett." "Rook Garrett," she repeated, as if testing the sound. "I am Lyra Va'Sora." "I know. Saw your file before I let you out." The station shuddered violently, sending us both against the wall. Suddenly the floor beneath us seemed to lose substance, and we dropped a few inches before the gravity stabilized again. "Gravitational flux," Lyra observed. "The phase-out accelerates." We continued moving, passing through sections where gravity pulled sideways or weakened entirely. In one corridor we found ourselves walking through a cloud of small objects, pens, screws, and a datapad, suspended in mid-air where normal physics had simply given up. "Need rest," Lyra finally said, her crystalline features dulling slightly. "Cannot continue without pause." My scanner showed a mess hall nearby. "This way. Should be safe enough for a quick break." The mess hall was deserted, tables still set with trays of food now rotted beyond recognition. We took seats in the corner with the best view of both entrances. Lyra sank into the chair, her crystalline formations dimming further. "What is this place?" she asked, looking around at the abandoned hall. "Research station called the Ark. Confederate military uses it for classified projects. Off the books." I pulled out a hydration pack and offered it to her. "Can you drink this?" She took the pack, examining it before finding the valve. "Yes." Different method. Same need. She brought it to her lips, and I watched, fascinated, as the water seemed to be absorbed directly through her skin rather than swallowed. "The Confederacy," she said after finishing. "They took me from border outpost, kept me sedated, but I was aware." Her voice hardened. They wanted weapons. Weapons? Lyra extended her arms, revealing patches where the crystalline formations were conspicuously absent. Scarred tissue surrounded the gaps, showing methodical extraction points. They extracted crystals. Analyzed. Attempted replication. Her fingers traced the scars. To build resonance amplifiers. Weapons that manipulate gravity, like my kind can naturally. I leaned forward, curiosity overriding caution. Your species can control gravity, not control, influence, harmonize. She looked at me directly. Why are you here, Rook Garrett? Not for rescue. I considered lying, but decided against it. I was hired to retrieve research data from this station before it phase shifts. Didn't know they had an Aetheri prisoner until I found you. This data, where is it stored? Central Command Hub. Other side of the station from the docking bay. Her eyes widened, the silver in them flashing brighter. That data contains more than weapons research. It has. She paused, seeming to search for words. Star maps. Coordinates to Aetheri sanctuary worlds. The implication hit me immediately. If the Confederacy got hold of those coordinates, they could launch strikes at the heart of Aetheri territory. No wonder the payment for this job was so high. We must destroy it, she said firmly. Before I could respond, my scanner beeped movement in the corridor outside. I pulled Lyra down behind a table just as the mess hall doors slid open with a hiss. 3 security drones floated in, their sensors sweeping the room. Standard Confederate models, equipped with stun capabilities and basic target recognition. They hovered methodically, following a search pattern through the tables. They detect heat signatures, I whispered, reaching for my pistol. Vera put her hand over mine, stopping me. No, watch. She straightened slightly, keeping below the table's edge. Her crystalline formations began to pulse with increasing brightness. The air around her hands seemed to warp. One drone drifted closer to our position. Vera extended her hand toward it, fingers splayed. The air between her hand and the drone visibly distorted. Suddenly, the drone crumpled inward, its metal shell collapsing with a sickening crunch. The other drones immediately oriented toward us, weapon systems activating with a high-pitched whine. Lyra made a sweeping gesture with both hands, and the remaining drones slammed together with bone-jarring force, crushing each other before dropping to the floor. She slumped backward, her glow fading dramatically. The crystals along her arms had dulled to an ashy gray. Need time to regenerate, she gasped, her voice weak again. I checked the doorway, then scooped her up. She felt even lighter than before, as if the energy expenditure had reduced her mass somehow. That was impressive, I said, carrying her toward the maintenance tunnel entrance. But now we need to move. Those drones were sending data back to Central Security. Lyra's head rested against my shoulder, her breathing shallow. The central hub. We must get the data. The docking bay is the other direction, I reminded her. My ship, the Corvus, is our only way off this station. Data first, she insisted weakly. Then, escape. I ducked into a service tunnel, checking my map projection. There's a maintenance shaft that connects to the central level. Might be our best route. Your suggestion to disable the main reactor as distraction, Lyra said suddenly, her voice stronger than I expected. It would kill anyone remaining on station. Station's going to phase out in 8 hours anyway, I countered. Anyone still here is already dead. You don't know that. She moved in my arms. Your kind always chooses violence first. I felt a flash of irritation. Your kind's pacifism didn't help much when they caught you, did it? As soon as I said it, I regretted the sharpness of my tone. But to my surprise, Lyra didn't recoil. True, she acknowledged. Perhaps both approaches are flawed. Her eyes found mine. We are different, but need each other now. The station shuddered again, and a section of ceiling collapsed behind us. I tightened my grip on her and increased my pace. Different approaches. Same goal, I conceded. Get the data. Get to my ship. Get out alive. Her crystals pulsed once in what I was beginning to recognize as agreement. The glow was returning slowly, changing from ashy gray to a faint purple. I adjusted my course, heading toward the central command hub instead of the docking bay. Maybe it was stupid to risk the detour, but the thought of the Confederacy getting their hands on Aetheri sanctuary coordinates didn't sit right with me. I'd left military service for a reason. 6 hours, I said, checking my chronometer. That's what we have to get the data and reach the Corvus. Lyra's hand found my shoulder, a gesture that seemed deliberately reassuring. We will succeed, Rook Garrett. I wasn't so confident, but her touch was surprisingly comforting. As we descended deeper into the maintenance tunnels, I wondered exactly what I'd gotten myself into, and why, for the first time in years, I didn't entirely regret it. The maintenance tunnels grew narrower as we descended toward the central hub. Lyra moved more steadily now, her crystalline formations regaining some of their luster as she recovered her strength. Each time the station shuddered, loose paneling crashed around us. This isn't normal structural failure, I noted, as we passed a section of wall that appeared to be aging rapidly, rust spreading across it like a time-lapse video. Phase change affects temporal stability first, Lyra explained. Matter becomes unstable when disconnected from normal time flow. We reached a maintenance access door marked with faded central command insignia. My neural mods interfaced with the security panel, bypassing the lockdown protocols with a series of code sequences I'd prepared before the mission. The door slid open with a reluctant groan. Central command stretched before us, a massive circular room ringed with workstations. Holographic displays flickered unpredictably, some showing station schematics, others displaying nothing but static. Bodies slumped at several consoles. Unlike the others we'd encountered, these showed no signs of violence. They appeared to have simply dropped dead at their posts. Radiation poisoning, I said, checking readings on my scanner. Levels must have spiked suddenly. Lyra approached one of the bodies, her eyes filled with something that looked like compassion. They suffered. Let's get what we came for and get out. I moved to the primary command console in the center of the room. Lyra headed to another terminal on the far side. I will search for attack records. I inserted a data spike into the main console and began the download sequence. The station's security was formidable, but my tools were specifically designed for this task. Progress indicators flashed across my visual field as terabytes of research data transferred into my secure storage. Found something, Lyra called. Her crystalline fingers had physically merged with the terminal interface, pulsing with light as she communicated directly with the system. Station attack records. I glanced at my download progress. 68% complete. What do they show? The Ark was attacked by third party, she said, her eyes fixed on information only she could see. Neither Confederate nor Aetheri. Pirates, mercenaries. She shook her head. Unknown configuration. No matching profiles in Confederate database. They attacked with targeted precision, breached containment only in specific research sections. Her fingers pulsed brighter. They knew what they were looking for. The console before me beeped as the download completed. I pulled the data spike free and secured it in an inner pocket of my jacket. We've got what we need. Let's move. As we headed toward the exit, a desk chair near the center of the room suddenly crumbled to dust, the particles hanging suspended in midair. Before I could comment, the dust reversed its dispersal, reforming into the chair, not just intact but newer, less worn than before. Phase change accelerates. We must hurry. We left Central Command and took a direct route toward the lower levels where the docking bay was located. The standard corridors were faster than maintenance tunnels, but also more exposed. My scanner showed no immediate threats, but the radiation levels were climbing steadily. As we rounded a corner into the main central corridor, Lyra suddenly grabbed my arm, pulling me to a stop. 20 meters ahead, the air itself seemed to warp and distort, creating a spherical bubble about 3 meters in diameter. What the hell is that? I whispered. Temporal bubble. Time moves differently inside. Lyra's voice was hushed with what might have been awe, much slower than outside. I saw movement within the distortion, a human figure, moving so slowly it appeared nearly frozen. A man in the distinctive uniform of a Confederate commander, his arm extended as if reaching for something, his face locked in concentration. My breath caught. Bishop. You know this human? Lyra asked. Commander Bishop. My former superior officer. I instinctively reached for my pulse pistol. He's the reason I left Confederate service. Bishop was suspended in mid-step, a sidearm visible in his holster. Even through the distortion, I could make out the cybernetic replacement that had replaced his left eye, glowing faintly blue against his weathered face. We must go around, Lyra said. Disturbing temporal bubble could collapse it. Free him. We skirted the edge of the bubble, giving it wide berth. Bishop's frozen body rotated slightly as we passed. His movements glacially slow, perhaps a full minute within the bubble was passing for each second outside it. His artificial eye seemed to track us, though I told myself that was impossible. How long will he stay trapped? I asked. Once we were safely past, unknown. Bubbles are unstable, could last hours or minutes. We continued through increasingly unstable sections of the station. In one corridor, water from a broken pipe hung in globules that drifted like jellyfish. In another, the floor panels rippled like liquid despite supporting our weight. We found temporary shelter in what had been a security office, the door still functioning enough to seal behind us. Lyra sank onto a bench, her crystalline features dulling slightly from exertion. Rest, brief rest, she said. I checked my chronometer. 5 hours and 20 minutes until complete phase-out. 5 minutes, no more. Lyra observed me, as I checked my weapons and equipment. The commander. He hunts you specifically. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, has been for 2 years. Why? I hadn't planned to share this story, but something about Lyra's direct look made concealment seem pointless. I was Special Operations. Black Ops team under Bishop's command. Our last mission was supposedly a terrorist cell takedown on Eridan Prime. I paused, the memories surfacing unwanted. When we got there, it wasn't terrorists, just colonists who'd refused Confederate mining rights on their land. Bishop ordered execution of everyone, said they were enemies of the state. Lyra's eyes shifted color slightly, the silver in them becoming more prominent. And you refused. Not at first. The admission burned in my throat. I followed orders until I saw the children. That's when I turned my weapon on my own squad. I looked down at my hands. Killed 2 of them before the others subdued me. Bishop would have executed me on the spot. But there was a colonial uprising, chaos. I escaped in the confusion. You saved lives, Lyra said. Not enough. Not soon enough. I met her eyes. Been on the run since. Taking mercenary jobs, smuggling runs. Anything to stay ahead of Confederate justice. Justice. Lyra spoke the word like she was tasting it. Your actions were just. Theirs were not. Her perspective was so simple, so clear, it almost made me smile. The victors define justice, Lyra. Confederate government defines it their way, as do the Aetheri Council, she acknowledged. Both perhaps equally flawed. She leaned forward, studying my face with interest. Neural modifications, she noted, gesturing toward the silver tracings visible beneath my skin near my temples. Military grade. Standard issue for Spec Ops, I explained. Enhanced visual processing. Tactical overlays. Basic biofeedback control. May I? She asked, raising her hand toward my temple. I hesitated, then nodded, curious. Her crystalline fingers approached the neural mod implant site at my temple. When she made contact, a jolt of sensation not quite electric, not quite thermal, shot through my nervous system. My visual field exploded with data. I couldn't comprehend. Patterns of light and information, flooding my consciousness. I jerked back instinctively, breaking the connection. Lyra looked equally startled, the crystals along her arm pulsing rapidly with bright light. What was that? I demanded. Unexpected, she answered, looking at her hand in wonder. Your neural network. It responded to my crystalline interface. Established connection. I struggled to describe it. It was like you were in my head. Not thoughts, she clarified quickly. Data pathways only. But yes, resonance between your technology and my biology. Her eyes met mine, fascinating compatibility. Before I could respond, the station's comm system suddenly crackled to life, making us both jump. Teams Alpha and Beta, converge on level 4, a cold, known voice ordered. Quarantine protocols have been breached. Find the Aetheri subject, and the traitor. Shoot on sight. Bishop, he'd escaped the temporal bubble. We need to move, I said, checking my chronometer. 5 hours remained. Vera rose immediately. Her moment of rest over. The docking bay. 3 levels down. We'll need to be careful. Bishop will have positioned his people between us and my ship. We slipped out of the security office and into the corridor. The station's deterioration had accelerated noticeably. Sections of wall and ceiling phased in and out of existence, and temporal anomalies rippled through the air like heat waves. I drew my pulse pistol, and Lyra's crystalline formations brightened in preparation. Neither of us mentioned the strange connection that had happened moments before, but I could feel something had changed between us. A barrier crossed, a distance shortened. As we moved toward the maintenance shaft that would take us down to the docking bay level, I found myself increasingly aware of her presence beside me. My survival now depended on this alien woman I'd known for only hours, and strangely, I was okay with that. Ready? I asked. As we reached the access hatch, Lyra nodded, her iridescent eyes reflecting my own determination back at me. Ready? I opened the hatch, and we began our descent toward the docking bay, and with luck, our escape from the Ark before it phased out of existence completely. The maintenance shaft narrowed as we descended, forcing us to move single file through the cramped metal tunnel. I took point, pulse pistol ready, with Lyra close behind. Her crystalline hands occasionally brushed against my back, sending a tingling sensation through my neural mods. We reached a junction where the shaft branched downward toward the docking bay. Voices came from below, human voices giving short commands. I held up my hand, signaling Lyra to stop. Crouching at the edge of the opening, I peered through the ventilation grate. 6 Confederate soldiers in full tactical gear stood in formation, weapons ready. Commander Bishop paced before them. Full sweep of all docking bays, Bishop ordered. 2-person teams, shoot the traitor on sight. The Aetheri specimen must be recovered alive. Specimen, Lyra whispered behind me, her voice bitter. I pulled back from the grate and turned to her. We're not getting through that way. Not with Bishop's entire team blocking the path. Alternatives? She asked. I checked my station schematic. There's another route through the life support section, but it'll add 40 minutes to our journey. Time we don't have, Lyra noted. I glanced at my chronometer. 4 hours remained until complete phase-out. Bishop's sudden appearance had already cost us precious time. We wait. I decided. His team will disperse to search the docking bays. That'll give us an opening. Lyra nodded, lowering herself to sit against the wall of the shaft. I sat opposite her, keeping the grate in my peripheral vision. Why is Bishop so focused on recapturing you? I asked, keeping my voice low. You're not the first Aetheri the Confederacy has captured. Lyra's eyes darkened. I am Lyra Va'Sora, daughter of the Supreme Architect of the Aetheri Collective. I stared at her, processing the revelation. Your royalty? Not royalty. Our leadership is based on merit, not bloodlines. She traced a pattern along her arm crystals. My father designs the quantum navigation systems that allow our ships to traverse dimensional folds. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. That's why my payment for this job was so high. My employer knew exactly who you were. Who hired you? Lyra asked. Contact named Maddox. Broker of information and rare goods. I shook my head, feeling foolish. Should have known the job was sketchy when they offered triple my usual rate. Through the grate, I watched Bishop dispatch his teams. 4 soldiers departed in pairs, leaving Bishop and 2 guards at the main entrance to the docking bay. Still too many, I muttered. My neural mods suddenly flashed a severe radiation warning. The numbers climbed rapidly, well beyond safe exposure levels. Radiation spike, I warned, reaching for my anti-rad injector. I had only 1 dose left. Lyra placed her hand over mine, stopping me. Save it. I can help. She moved forward onto her knees, her face inches from mine in the narrow space. This will require close proximity, very close. Before I could question her, Lyra moved toward me, her body pressing against mine. The initial contact sent a shock of cold through my system, but it quickly faded as she positioned herself practically in my lap. Her face near my neck. "Remain still," she whispered, her breath cool against my skin. The crystals along her body began to pulse with increasing intensity. I felt a strange pressure building around us, as if the air was becoming denser. My ears popped as the pressure equalized. "Gravitational shield," Lyra explained. "It will deflect radiation particles." The warning indicators in my vision began to drop, confirming her shield was working. But I was very aware of her body against mine. "Your temperature," I noted, surprised. "It's warming near me." Where her skin touched mine, the initial coldness had faded to something closer to human normal. The crystalline formations along her arms pulsed with a soft lavender light. "Bioharmonic resonance adaptation," she explained, though her voice seemed less clinical than her words. "My crystalline matrix adjusts to compatible bioenergy patterns." "Compatible?" I asked, trying to ignore how her weight felt against me. The crystals along her face flushed with deeper color. Unexpectedly so. We remained locked in that position as the radiation levels continued to fluctuate wildly around us. Through the shield's distortion, I could see sections of the station's walls phasing in and out of existence nearby. "You didn't mention your father is essentially the Aetheri head of state," I said, partly to distract myself from our proximity. "Would it have mattered?" she countered. "Would you have left me in the containment field, if you'd known?" I considered the question honestly. No, but I might have asked for more money. She made a sound that reminded me of laughter, though it resonated differently than human laughter would. The vibration traveled from her body into mine. "The Confederacy believes my father's research can be weaponized," she continued. "They extracted samples of my crystal structure hoping to develop gravitational weapons. And did they succeed?" Her eyes met mine, impossibly close. "No. The crystals require consciousness to function. Sentience. They tried to force growth on neural tissue samples, but failed." I thought about the implications. "They tried growing your crystals on human brain tissue." "Yes. The compatibility between our species is complex." Her fingers traced the neural mod implant at my temple. "Your technology attempts what my people do naturally. Interface between consciousness and environment." The maintenance shaft suddenly shuddered violently. Pieces of the metal grating around us faded partially out of existence, then snapped back. Lyra intensified her shield, the pressure around us increasing. My scanner beeped. "Station systems are triggering emergency protocols. Decontamination sequence in the docking bay." Through the grate I watched as warning lights flashed. Bishop snarled orders to his remaining guards, directing them toward emergency stations. "This is our chance," I said. "Decontamination will seal certain sections, force them to reposition." Lyra nodded and carefully withdrew from our entangled position. The radiation warning immediately returned to my neural mods, but at lower levels than before. "Ready?" I asked. "Yes." I counted down as the decontamination alert reached its final warning. When Bishop and his guards moved to override the lockdown, I kicked the grate open and dropped down, Lyra following closely behind. We sprinted across the open floor of the docking bay, using cargo containers for cover. My ship, the Corvus, sat on landing pad 3. Its sleek black hull, a welcome sight after hours of navigating the dying station. "There," I pointed, ushering Lyra toward the Corvus's lowered ramp. We were halfway to the ship, when a plasma bolt struck the ground near my feet. I spun around, bringing up my pulse pistol. Bishop stood 20 meters away, his regulation sidearm aimed at us. His cybernetic eye glowed fiercely in the dim emergency lighting. "Should have known you'd side with the enemy, Garrett," he snarled. "Always were soft when it mattered." I kept my weapon trained on him. "It's over, Bishop. The station's phasing out. Get your men to evacuation pods." "Not without the specimen." His artificial eye focused on Lyra. "Do you know how valuable she is? The daughter of the Supreme Architect. The secrets in her crystalline structure could win the war." "There doesn't need to be a war," Lyra said, her voice carrying despite its softness. Bishop laughed. "Naive. Both of you." He steadied his aim. "Move away from her, Garrett. Last chance." I felt Lyra move beside me, as her crystalline structures began to glow brighter. Without looking at her, I understood what she planned. I could feel the gravitational distortion beginning to form around us. Something passed between us in that moment. An understanding that required no words. I adjusted my stance slightly, angling my pulse pistol. "Go to hell, Bishop," I said. In one synchronized movement, Lyra thrust both hands forward as I fired. My plasma bolt hit the distortion field she'd created, its trajectory bending impossibly. The energy discharge combined with her gravitational manipulation, creating a concussive wave that slammed into Bishop, lifting him off his feet and hurling him across the docking bay into a stack of supply crates. "Run," I shouted, grabbing Lyra's hand and sprinting toward the Corvus. We raced up the ramp as alarms blared throughout the docking bay. I slapped the hatch control, and the ramp began to rise even as we scrambled into the ship. "Cockpit," I directed, leading her through the narrow corridor of my small vessel. I dropped into the pilot's seat, fingers flying across the controls. The Corvus started up, systems initializing faster than standard thanks to the modifications I'd made over the years. "Strap in," I told Lyra, who took the co-pilot seat. Through the viewport, I could see Bishop extracting himself from the wreckage of crates, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. His cybernetic eye locked onto our ship, hatred visible even at this distance. "Docking clamps releasing," I announced as the ship shuddered. "We're clear." The Corvus lifted off the docking bay floor as I engaged the thruster array. 3 hours remained until the station's complete phase-out. 3 hours to put as much distance as possible between us and the Ark before it disappeared from our reality. As we passed through the magnetic barrier into open space, I risked a glance at Lyra. Her crystalline features caught the light of distant stars, creating miniature constellations across her skin. "Where to?" she asked, her eyes meeting mine. I turned back to the controls, plotting a course away from Confederate space. Somewhere neither the Confederacy nor the Aetheri will look for us. I know a place. The Corvus accelerated into the darkness, leaving the doomed research station behind. In the rear sensors, I could see Bishop's command vessel detaching from its dock, preparing to pursue. Warning indicators flashed across the control panel, drowning the cockpit in angry red light. "Faster," I urged the ship, pushing the engines beyond safety limits. The Corvus responded with a groan of stressed metal. "Something's wrong," Lyra said, her voice steady, despite the chaos. "Look." Through the viewport, space itself seemed to warp. Light bent around distant stars, stretching them into impossible shapes. The navigation system sputtered, coordinates changing randomly across the display. The phase-out. I realized cold dread settling in my stomach. "It's starting early." Lyra leaned forward. "Not just the station. The quantum instability is spreading outward." I checked our position. We were barely 2,000 kilometers from the Ark, nowhere near safe distance for phase shift repercussions. The Corvus rocked again as a wave of distortion hit us, knocking the stabilizers offline. "Bishop's gaining," I warned, watching his vessel cut through the distortion wake behind us. Lyra unstrapped from the co-pilot seat and moved beside me. Without warning, she placed her hands on the navigation console. Her crystalline fingers elongated, melding into the ship's interface. The console lit up with patterns I'd never seen before. "What are you doing?" I asked, struggling to keep the ship steady. Seeing. Her voice had taken on a distant quality. The crystals along her arms pulsed with increasing brightness, sending cascades of light through the ship's systems. Reality fluctuates around us. Normal navigation is useless here. The ship's displays flickered, then stabilized, showing new information. Paths of light appeared on the main view screen, invisible corridors through the quantum chaos. There. Lyra pointed toward what appeared to be a solid asteroid field directly ahead. "Temporal corridor will open in 40 seconds. I stared at the view screen in disbelief. "That's solid rock." Only in this moment of time, she looked at me, iridescent and certain. "Do you trust me?" Bishop's ship fired. A warning shot that passed close enough to make our shields flare. We had seconds to decide. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. I trusted her completely. I gripped the controls and aimed directly for the largest asteroid. The Corvus surged forward, engines straining as we accelerated toward what looked like certain destruction. 30 seconds, Lyra whispered, her voice strained from the connection with the ship. Bishop fired again, this time striking our rear shields. Damage alerts screamed through the cockpit. 20 seconds. The asteroid filled our viewport now, its cratered surface rushing toward us with terrifying speed. Every instinct screamed at me to pull up, to change course. 10 seconds. I held firm, knuckles white on the controls. Bishop's ship closed the distance, preparing to disable us. 5, 4. The asteroid's surface became impossibly detailed. I could see individual rocks, shadows, the texture of cosmic dust collected over millennia. The solid rock before us seemed to dissolve, revealing a tunnel of warped space-time. Light twisted around us. As the Corvus plunged into the corridor, the ship bucked wildly, systems changing randomly as we passed through the quantum anomaly. Behind us, Bishop's ship tried to follow but was caught in the collapsing edge of the corridor. His vessel spun away, damaged but not destroyed. The tunnel of light around us pulsed and contracted. For a moment, I lost all sense of direction, of up or down, as if we were everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Then, with a final lurch, the Corvus broke through into normal space. I looked back just in time to see the arc fold inward upon itself, collapsing into a singularity point before vanishing completely. Bishop's damaged ship was nowhere to be seen. Lyra withdrew her hands from the console, the crystals along her arms dimming as she broke the connection. She sagged against the pilot chair, exhausted. That was. I searched for words that could possibly describe what she'd done. Impossible. A faint smile touched her lips. Not impossible, just beyond current human understanding. I checked our position, relieved to find standard navigation working again. We'd emerged several light years from the Ark's location, well outside the regular patrol routes. "How did you do that?" I asked, setting the ship to a minimal power drift to avoid detection. "My people navigate by perceiving quantum possibilities," she explained, her voice tired but patient. "What appears solid to you is simply matter's most probable state." I saw the corridor forming, a temporary alignment of improbability. I shook my head, amazed. That's one hell of an escape route. Lyra returned to the co-pilot seat, her movements more sluggish than before. The connection drained me. "I need rest." I nodded, adjusting the ship's environmental controls to a cooler temperature I hoped would be more comfortable for her. "We should be safe for the moment. Get some sleep if you can." She tilted her head, looking at me. "You also require rest." "I'll take first watch," I insisted. "We're not out of danger yet." She didn't argue, settling back in her seat and closing her eyes. Within minutes her breathing slowed, and the crystals along her body glowed in a gentle rhythmic pattern I assumed was her equivalent of sleep. Turning back to the controls, I set long-range scanners to alert mode and allowed myself to relax slightly. We'd survived. For now. Mething our relief was short-lived. 6 hours later, the proximity alarm jolted me from a light doze. Lyra was already awake, looking at the scanner display. Multiple vessels, she said, her voice tight, approaching from 2 vectors. I checked the readings, cursing under my breath. Confederate interceptors from bearing 340. Fast attack vessels. And there Lyra pointed to the second group of signals. Aetheri recovery ships. My people, we were caught between 2 forces, neither of which would welcome us. The Confederates wanted me dead, and Lyra captured. The Aetheri wanted their supreme architect's daughter returned and me eliminated as a kidnapper. Options, Lyra asked, remarkably calm given our situation. I pulled up the star charts for this sector, searching for anywhere to hide. Mining colony, abandoned after the asteroid belt was depleted. 3 planets. Minimal monitoring. We could lose ourselves there. How long? At maximum burn. 2 hours. We'd reach the system before either group could intercept us. Lyra nodded. Then we go. I engaged the main engines, setting course for the Oros system. The Corvus responded eagerly. Its streamlined design built for exactly this kind of runaway acceleration. They'll track our engine signature. I warned. We can't stay long. Long enough to examine the data, Lyra said firmly. The data? In all the chaos of our escape, I'd almost forgotten about the stolen research from the Ark. The information that had cost lives, and nearly cost us our own. For the next 2 hours we maintained silence, both lost in our own thoughts as the pursuing vessels fell behind. The Corvus performed perfectly, its enhanced stealth systems helping mask our trajectory as we approached the Oros system. Oros 3 presented itself as a brownish-gray orb against the blackness of space. Once a vibrant mining community, the planet had been abandoned when its resources were depleted, leaving behind the infrastructure without the population. I guided the Corvus into the atmosphere, flying low over endless dunes toward the coordinates of the main mining facility. The massive complex appeared on the horizon, a sprawling collection of prefabricated buildings and extraction equipment, all coated with a layer of dust. We landed in what had once been a maintenance bay, the building's partially collapsed roof providing cover from orbital scans. Home sweet home, I muttered, powering down all non-essential systems, at least for the next 12 hours. Lyra gathered supplies while I secured the ship, setting proximity alerts that would warn us of any approaching vessels. When we were satisfied with our preparations, we made our way into the facility itself. The mining outpost's central command building was largely intact, its thick walls designed to withstand the planet's frequent dust storms. Emergency lighting still functioned, drawing power from solar collectors that had survived the abandonment. This will serve, Lyra decided. Clearing dust from a central console. Bring the data. I removed the data spike from my jacket and handed it to her. Her crystalline fingers reshaped themselves around the device, interfacing directly with its storage medium. Impressive trick, I commented. Crystalline structures are natural data conduits, she explained, looking distant as she processed the information. Similar to your neural mods, but more flexible. I found a chair and sat, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up with me. My neural mods fed me a steady stream of warnings about fatigue toxins building in my system. What are you finding? I asked, after several minutes of silence. Lyra's expression had grown increasingly troubled. Weapons research, as expected. Extraction methodologies. Crystalline replication attempts. She paused, the light glowing stronger through her fingers. But there's more. Something unexpected.
What?
She disconnected from the data spike and turned to me. They were successful. At weaponizing your crystals? No. She approached, kneeling beside my chair. At creating a symbiotic bond between Aetheri crystals and human neural tissue. I straightened, suddenly alert, despite my fatigue. What does that mean? It means our supposed biological incompatibility is a lie. The research shows that properly cultivated Aetheri crystals can form a permanent beneficial interface with human neural tissue. Not just technological interfaces like your mods, but true biological integration. I don't understand, I said. Why would that matter? Why suppress it? Because it undermines the fundamental justification for the conflict between our species. Lyra rose, pacing the room. For centuries, both governments have claimed that humans and Aetheri cannot coexist in shared environments due to biological incompatibility. This research proves otherwise. I watched her move, trying to process the implications. You're saying both governments buried this discovery? Yes. She stopped, turning to face me. War serves their purposes. The Confederate military-industrial complex profits from continued conflict. The Aetheri collective maintains power through the narrative of human threat, and peace would threaten power on both sides. I finished, the picture becoming clear. Lyra nodded. Precisely. We spent hours reviewing the data, uncovering layer after layer of suppressed research. Scientists on both sides had discovered the compatibility years ago, but their findings had been classified, their work redirected toward weapons development instead. Outside, the sun set on Oros 3, plunging the abandoned facility into darkness. The temperature dropped rapidly, a common occurrence on planets with thin atmospheres. Environmental controls are minimal, I noted, checking the facility's systems. Temperatures going to drop below freezing within the hour. Lyra looked up from the data display. A problem for you, not for me. My kind tolerates extreme cold. Lucky you, I muttered, already feeling the chill seeping through my jacket. I'll check the supply closets for thermal blankets. The search proved fruitless. Years of scavengers had stripped the facility of anything useful, leaving only dust and empty storage units. When I returned to the command center, Lyra had arranged cushions from broken chairs into a makeshift sleeping area. No luck, she asked, seeing my empty hands. I shook my head, rubbing my arms against the increasing cold. Nothing. We should return to the ship. Too risky. The power signature might be detected. She tilted her head, looking at me. Your body temperature is dropping. I've survived worse, I lied, my teeth beginning to chatter. Lyra looked concerned. Unnecessary suffering serves no purpose. She patted the cushions beside her. Share body heat, a basic survival technique. I hesitated, remembering the strange connection that had formed when we'd touched before. But as the temperature continued to plummet, practicality won over caution. All right, I conceded, lowering myself onto the makeshift bed. Lyra moved closer, uncertainty in her movements. I'm not familiar with human comfort boundaries. At this point, survival trumps boundaries, I said, trying to sound casual despite my nervousness. She nodded and moved until she was beside me, her body initially radiating the cold I'd felt before. But as she settled against me, something remarkable happened. The crystalline formations along her arms and torso began to glow with soft light, and the cold dissipated, replaced by gentle warmth. You're warming up, I observed, surprised. Bioharmonic resonance adaptation, she explained softly. My crystalline matrix adjusts to compatible bioenergy patterns. You mentioned that before. In the maintenance shaft. She nodded, her face close to mine. The phenomenon is stronger now, more complete. The warmth from her body increased, spreading through my cold limbs. It wasn't just heat. It carried a pleasant tingling sensation, similar to what I'd felt when she touched my neural implants. Is this what the research was about? I asked. This adaptation, part of it, she confirmed. The scientists discovered that prolonged proximity between our species triggers physiological changes. Adaptations that make coexistence not only possible, but beneficial. I became intensely aware of how our bodies fit together, curled against each other on the makeshift bed. The crystals along her skin no longer felt hard or uncomfortable. They seemed to yield slightly where they pressed against me, conforming to avoid causing discomfort. Perhaps we are proof, Lyra whispered, her voice softer than I'd heard before. The crystals on her face glowed with gentle flickers of light, illuminating us in the darkness of the abandoned control room. Without thinking, I raised my hand and traced the patterns of crystal that flowed across her cheek. The initial cold shock I'd felt when we first met was completely absent now. Instead, her skin felt pleasantly cool against my fingertips, the crystals smooth and warm. Lyra's eyes shifted color, the silver in them becoming more prominent. "Your neural mods," she observed. "They're responding to my proximity." Like they were communicating with her crystals on a level I couldn't consciously perceive. The adaptation goes both ways, I realized. Her hand found mine, crystal fingers intertwining with human ones. Yes. I don't know which of us moved first. Perhaps we both did. But suddenly her lips were against mine, cool at first contact, then warming. The crystalline patterns on her face glowed brighter, casting soft light across our features. The neural mods at my temples vibrated in response, creating a feedback loop of sensation that was entirely new and unexpectedly pleasant. When we finally parted, Lyra's eyes were wide, the silver in them now dominant over the violet. "I didn't know if that would be possible," she admitted. I smiled, feeling oddly content despite our desperate situation. "Looks like we're discovering all sorts of possibilities." She settled against me, her head resting on my shoulder. The warmth between us had reached an equilibrium, comfortable for us both. "Our people have been fighting for so long," she murmured, "over differences that might actually be our greatest strength." I tightened my arm around her, watching the play of light from her crystals across the ceiling of our temporary shelter. Maybe that's why they kept it secret. Hard to maintain hatred when you discover you're compatible after all. I closed my eyes finally, surrendering to exhaustion. My last thought before sleep claimed me was that we weren't just fugitives anymore. We were something far more dangerous. The lights of Helios Station appeared through the Corvus's viewport. I had gotten a couple hours of sleep but somehow felt even more tired. The central hub of the station rotated slowly around a captured asteroid that served as both anchor and power source. "Impressive," Lyra said, leaning forward in the co-pilot seat. "I've never seen a human station of this design before." "That's because Helios wasn't built by the Confederacy." I adjusted our approach vector. Independent traders and outlaws cobbled it together over decades. No laws except the ones enforced by whoever has the most firepower that week. 3 weeks had passed since our narrow escape from Oros 3. We'd spent most of that time in deep space moving through unpatrolled sectors, stretching our supplies to the limit. The discovery we'd made in the stolen research data had changed everything, proof that humans and Aetheri were not only compatible, but potentially symbiotic. A truth that would undermine the justification for the ongoing conflict between our species. "Are you certain your contact can be trusted?" Lyra asked, the crystals along her arms pulsing with subtle anxiety. "Maddox, trusted is a strong word. I sent the docking request using an old smuggler's code. Let's say they can be predicted. Credits speak louder than loyalty. The person who hired you to retrieve the data from the Ark. The same." I glanced at her, "which means they probably knew exactly who you were when they paid me to extract that research." Lyra's expression remained neutral, but the crystals along her face dimmed slightly. "Then why help us now?" "Because Maddox loves being on the winning side of any equation. And right now, that's us. We've got information both governments want suppressed." A green light flashed on the communications panel, granting us docking clearance. I guided the Corvus into the assigned bay, settling the ship with practiced precision. Through the viewport, I could see the bay was private, no dockworkers, no automated systems, just a sealed environment, with a single pressure door leading into the station. "Time for your disguise," I said, as the landing sequence completed. Lyra nodded, and reached for the bundle beside her seat. We'd spent hours modifying standard clothing to conceal her distinctly alien features. The result was a hooded cloak with an integrated facial wrap and gloves designed to cover her crystalline extremities. When fully dressed, she looked like a religious pilgrim from the outer colonies, eccentric, but not uncommon enough to draw sustained attention. I watched as she pulled the hood forward. "How do I look?" she asked, her voice slightly muffled by the facial covering. "Like you belong here," I answered, gathering my own gear. I strapped my pulse pistol to my thigh and secured a smaller backup weapon at my ankle, which means no one will look twice. Half the people on Helios are hiding from something. We exited the Corvus, securing it with enhanced encryption protocols I'd installed during our journey. The station's artificial gravity felt slightly stronger than standard, a quirk of Helios's independent status, unconcerned with Confederate regulations. Maddox waited on the other side of the pressure door, leaning against the wall. Their appearance hadn't changed much since I'd last seen them. Multicolored synthetic hair, now styled in tight coils with bioluminescent strands, the same mechanical left hand that never stopped moving, fingers constantly recalibrating. "Garrett." They greeted me with a lopsided smile. "You look terrible. Space life not agreeing with you." "Been better," I admitted. "Thanks for the doc. Not many safe harbors these days." Maddox's attention moved to Lyra, the cybernetic implants around their eyes whirring as they scanned her disguise. "And this must be your mysterious passenger. The reason half the sector's hunting you." Lyra remained silent, her posture tense. "Save the introductions for somewhere private," I said. Maddox nodded, tapping a sequence into their mechanical wrist. A service door opened in the corridor wall. "This way. Maintenance tunnels run throughout the station. No surveillance." We followed Maddox through service passages, climbing up ladder wells and crossing narrow catwalks. The station buzzed around us, the sounds of thousands of people going about their lives just beyond the thin walls. "Confederate patrols have increased," Maddox commented as we walked. 3 warships docked last week. Unusual for a station they officially don't recognize. "Bishop," I guessed. "He's persistent." Maddox glanced back. "That's one word for it. Another would be obsessed. Your face is on every terminal in Confederate space, Garrett. Quite the bounty, too." We emerged from the tunnels into a spacious apartment that occupied the entire top level of one of the station's smaller modules. Panoramic viewports offered a 360-degree view of surrounding space and the station's rotating rings. "Home sweet home," Maddox announced, engaging a series of security protocols that sealed the doors and opaqued the windows. Completely isolated system. No external access. Lyra finally lowered her hood, unwinding the facial covering. Maddox stared openly as her crystalline features caught the light, sending prismatic reflections across the room. "Well," they said after a moment, "that explains a lot." "This is Lyra," I said simply. "Lyra Va'Sora," Maddox corrected, surprising us both at our expressions. They shrugged. "I do my research. Daughter of the supreme architect of the Aetheri collective. No wonder bishops turned the sector upside down looking for you." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You knew my identity when you hired Rook to retrieve the research data." "Suspected," Maddox admitted, crossing to a food synthesizer built into the wall. "Confirmed when you both disappeared, and half the Confederate fleet mobilized. Drink? Synthesized, but not terrible." "Why?" I demanded. "Why hire me to extract data you knew would be explosive?" Maddox programmed the synthesizer, seemingly unconcerned by my anger. "Same reason I'm helping you now. I'm tired of this war. It's bad for honest criminals. Blockades restrict trade routes. Military checkpoints cut into profits. You risked our lives for your profit margins." I stepped toward them, fists clenched. "I risked your lives," Maddox corrected, handing us each a glass of amber liquid, "for the chance to end a century-long conflict that's killed millions. The fact that peace would be good for business is just a bonus." I accepted the drink, but didn't taste it. "You could have told me what I was walking into." "Would you have gone if I had?" Maddox raised an eyebrow. "I needed the job done, not sabotaged by your conscience, Garrett." Lyra placed a restraining hand on my arm, her touch instantly calming the anger coursing through me. "What's done is done. We have the data now. We need to determine how best to use it." Maddox gestured toward a doorway. "Living quarters through there. 2 bedrooms, stocked with supplies. Stay as long as you need. My only condition. I want access to Aetheri technology insights. Lyra tilted her head. Why? Because your people are decades ahead of humans in quantum engineering, and I'm a collector of valuable information. Maddox smiled. Fair trade for sanctuary. I glanced at Lyra, who nodded slightly after considering the proposal. Agreed, I told Maddox. But nothing that could be weaponized. Wouldn't dream of it, they replied, though their eyes gleamed with anticipation. Get settled. We'll talk terms tomorrow. My nest days on Helios Station blended together, marked by the artificial cycle of lights brightening to mimic dawn and dimming for night phase. Lyra and I established a routine in Maddox's apartment, which became our sanctuary and prison. Each morning, Lyra worked with Maddox, sharing limited insights into Aetheri gravitational engineering in exchange for supplies and information. I spent those hours planning our next move, analyzing station security patterns and tracking Confederate movements through the sector. In the afternoons, I trained Lyra in combat techniques. Though naturally pacifistic, she recognized the necessity of self-defense. Balance is key, I explained, demonstrating a defensive stance in the apartment's central room, which we'd cleared for practice. Human attackers will expect to overpower you with brute force. Lyra mimicked my position, her movements naturally graceful. My people rarely engage in physical combat. Our abilities make it unnecessary. And what happens when you're too drained to use those abilities? Or in a situation where using them would expose you? She nodded, acknowledging the point. Show me again. I moved behind her, adjusting her stance with gentle pressure on her shoulders and hips. The contact sent a tingle through my neural implants, a phenomenon that had strengthened during our weeks together. The evenings belonged to us alone. Lyra taught me rudimentary quantum mechanics, attempting to explain how her people perceived reality differently. It's not just theory to us, she said one night, sitting cross-legged on the apartment floor, crystals glowing softly in the dimmed light. We see the probabilities, the potential states of matter. I sat across from her, fascinated. Is that how you found the escape route from the Ark? You saw a probability path. Yes. The quantum corridor existed as potential, not actuality. I merely encouraged it to manifest. Could you teach me to see them too? Her expression softened. Your neural mods provide an interface. With time, perhaps. She reached out, fingers gently touching my temple where the silver traces of my implants were visible beneath the skin. The now common connection formed between us, her crystalline biology communicating with my technological enhancements in ways neither of our species had officially acknowledged as possible. These moments of connection had become increasingly important to us both. Our physiological differences made conventional intimacy challenging, but we'd discovered something perhaps more profound, a melding of consciousness that transcended physical limitations. There, she whispered as the connection deepened. Do you see? Through her eyes I glimpsed the world as she perceived it, matter as probability clouds rather than solid objects, potential pathways shimmering in the air. The vision lasted only seconds before my human brain struggled to process the information overload. I gasped as the connection broke, blinking to readjust to normal perception. Beautiful, I managed. Beautiful and terrifying. She smiled, the crystals along her face glowing brighter. That's how I see you. Mine-us. On our 17th day at Helios Station, Maddox brought news that sharpened our purpose. The Armistice Day Summit, they announced, dropping a data chip on the table where we were eating breakfast. Scheduled for 3 weeks from now on Nexus Prime. I activated the chip, projecting its contents above the table. Details of the diplomatic summit appeared, security arrangements, delegate lists, scheduling. Both governments will send high-level representatives. Maddox continued. Official story is negotiations on prisoner exchanges, but my sources say there's talk of expanding the ceasefire zones. Lyra leaned forward, examining the projection. My father will attend, she noted, pointing to a name on the Aetheri delegation list. The Supreme Architect never leaves our core systems, unless the matter is significant. And look who's handling Confederate security. I said, highlighting another name. Bishop Lyra read. He's been promoted. Chief of Security for the entire Confederate delegation. Maddox looked pleased with themselves for delivering such valuable intelligence. Apparently, failing to recapture you two hasn't hurt his career. I stood pacing the room as possibilities formed in my mind. This is it. Our opportunity. For what? Maddox asked. To release the data, Lyra answered, understanding my thought process immediately. With both governments' representatives present, neither side could suppress the information. Broadcast the truth about human Aetheri compatibility during the summit, I elaborated. Force them to acknowledge it publicly. Maddox whistled. Ambitious and suicidal. Can you get us credentials? I asked. Technical staff, support personnel, something that would give us access. Possibly, Maddox admitted. For a significant increase in Aetheri technological insights. Lyra nodded. Agreed. But we will need more than credentials. We need a broadcast system that can override security protocols. For the next week, our routine shifted to summit preparations. Maddox procured technical specifications for Nexus Prime's communication systems, and Lyra designed a quantum transmitter that could bypass conventional blocking measures. I focused on creating our cover identities and planning escape routes. Our time on Helios had given us something precious, not just safety, but purpose. The mission we'd committed to had become more than exposure of a government conspiracy. It had become a fight for a future where our species could coexist. Everything changed on our 24th day of sanctuary. I was returning from a supply run to the lower levels, where I'd purchased specialized components for Lyra's transmitter design. The maintenance tunnels seemed emptier than usual. The normal background noise of the station slightly altered. My neural mods pinged a warning, elevated security communications on standard Confederate frequencies. I accelerated my pace, taking the most direct route back to Maddox's apartment rather than the usual circuitous path. I was 3 levels away when the station-wide alert system activated, bathing the corridors in pulsing amber light. A calm, automated voice announced, "Security sweep in progress. All residents, please present identification at designated checkpoints." Confederates never conducted security sweeps on independent stations, not unless they were hunting high-value targets. I broke into a run, using maintenance shafts to bypass the forming checkpoints. When I reached the apartment level, I found the corridor blocked by 4 armed Confederate soldiers in full tactical gear, retreating before they spotted me. I took an alternate route, climbing through ventilation ducts that Maddox had shown us as emergency exits. I emerged into the apartment through a ceiling panel in the storage room, dropping silently to the floor. "Lyra," I called in a harsh whisper. Pulse pistol drawn. The apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, equipment scattered. Signs of a struggle, but no blood. I moved toward the main room and froze. Commander Bishop stood by the panoramic window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the station below. He hadn't seen me yet. I raised my pistol, but before I could fire, the pressure door behind me hissed open. I spun, firing at the Confederate soldiers who poured through. My first shot caught one in the chest, dropping him instantly. The second soldier returned fire, forcing me to dive behind an overturned table. "Garrett," Bishop's voice carried over the gunfire. "Surrender now, and I might let you live long enough to stand trial." "Where's Lyra?" I demanded, checking my ammunition display. 14 charges remaining. The Aetheri specimen is secure. Bishop replied coolly, much more cooperative. Once we explained the alternatives, rage surged through me. But I fought to control it. Emotional decisions would get me killed. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing." Yet, I could hear Bishop moving, his footsteps measured. "Her value as a research subject remains high. Your value, however, diminishes by the second." A plasma bolt struck the table, melting a portion of its surface inches from my position. I rolled away, firing blind to force the soldiers back into cover. My neural mods highlighted potential escape routes, calculating survival probabilities for each. The ventilation shaft was my best option. If I could reach it, I lobbed my backup weapon across the room, its clatter drawing attention and fire. In that moment of distraction, I sprinted for the storage room. A searing pain exploded across my right shoulder as a plasma bolt grazed me. I stumbled but didn't fall, crashing through the doorway and slamming it shut behind me. The lock wouldn't hold them long, but I only needed seconds. I leapt onto a storage container, reaching for the open vent panel. Boots hammered against the door as I pulled myself up, the wound in my shoulder hurting badly. I made it into the shaft just as the door burst open, yanking my legs up as shots peppered the ceiling around me. Crawling through the ventilation system, I forced myself to think clearly despite the pain. Bishop had Lyra, that was certain. But were they still on the station, or had he already transferred her to a Confederate vessel? I needed information, and there was only one person who might have it. 20 minutes later, I dropped from a maintenance hatch into one of the station's lower-level markets. The security sweep had caused chaos, with residents arguing with Confederate soldiers at improvised checkpoints. I kept my head down, stolen maintenance coveralls concealing my identity and injured shoulder. Maddox's secondary safehouse was located in the station's manufacturing sector, a small room tucked between industrial fabricators. I accessed it using an emergency code they'd given us, finding the space empty but active. Display screens monitoring station security feeds. I didn't have long to wait. Maddox slipped in 30 minutes later, their multicolored hair tucked beneath a plain cap, their mechanical hand concealed by a glove. Garrett, they exhaled in relief upon seeing me. You're alive. Where's Lyra? I demanded, my pistol aimed steadily at their chest. Maddox raised their hands. I don't know. Confederate Special Forces breached my security. I was in the trading hub when it happened. You sold us out, I accused. No! They insisted, eyes wide. This is my station, my reputation. If I can't protect clients, my business dies. I studied their face, looking for deception. Finding none, I lowered my weapon slightly. Bishop has her. How did he find us? Maddox shook their head. Unknown. But there's more. Someone else was looking for you too. Arrived yesterday. Made inquiries in the right places. Who? An Aetheri. Didn't give a name, but moved like military. I processed this new information. An Aetheri operative on Helios, at the same time as Bishop's forces couldn't be coincidence. I need to get to the docking bay. See if they've taken her off station yet. Maddox moved to a console, bringing up security feeds. Confederate cruiser docked 6 hours ago. No departures since the alert began. They pointed to a feed showing a secured corridor, holding cells on level 12. That's where they'd process high-value prisoners before transport. I checked my pistol's charge. I need weapons, and a distraction. Weapons I can provide, Maddox said, opening a hidden compartment in the wall to reveal an impressive arsenal. Distraction too. But Garrett, this is suicide. A full Confederate Special Forces team against one man. I selected a more powerful pulse rifle and additional ammunition. I'm not leaving her. Maddox regarded me silently for a moment, then nodded. I've never seen a human risk everything for an Aetheri before. It's educational. She'd do the same for me. I believe you. They handed me a small detonator. Environmental systems on level 10. Blow it and emergency protocols will lock down all connecting corridors. Should divide their forces. Armed and with a rough plan, I made my way through the station's service areas toward level 12. The wound in my shoulder throbbed, but I pushed the pain aside, focusing on the task ahead. I was 3 corridors away from the holding cells when I triggered the detonator. A distant boom was followed by blaring alarms and the hiss of emergency barriers deploying. Confederate soldiers rushed past my hiding spot, responding to the new threat. Moving quickly, I approached the holding cell area. 2 guards remained at the entrance, alert but distracted by communication chatter in their helmets. I took them down with precision shots before they could report contact. The holding cell corridor was empty, except for a single Confederate soldier standing guard outside the last cell. I raised my rifle, preparing to eliminate the final obstacle, when the guard suddenly stiffened and collapsed to the floor. Behind him stood a tall figure, unmistakably Aetheri, with blue crystalline formations, more geometric and military in appearance than Lyra's. He turned toward me, apparently unsurprised by my presence. Human, he acknowledged, his voice resonant, with the same harmonic quality as Lyra's. You are Rook Garrett. I kept my weapon trained on him. Who are you? I am Thane, recovery operate, for the Aetheri Collective. His crystalline eyes assessed me with cool efficiency. You have something that belongs to us. Lyra doesn't belong to anyone, I countered. A hint of what might have been amusement crossed his features, an interesting perspective, but not one shared by her father, the supreme architect. Before I could respond, gunfire erupted from the corridor behind us. Confederate reinforcements had arrived sooner than expected. This discussion must wait, Thane decided. Turning toward the cell, he placed his hand against the lock mechanism, his crystalline fingers extending into the system. The door slid open to reveal Lyra, seemingly unharmed but visibly weakened. Her eyes widened at the sight of us both. Rook, Thane, explanations later, I urged, moving to her side. Can you walk? She nodded, pushing herself upright. Yes. Thane moved to support her, but I stepped between them. I've got her. Your shoulder is injured, Thane observed dispassionately. I'm fine, I insisted, helping Lyra toward the exit. The corridor behind us was now filled with plasma fire as Confederate soldiers engaged with unseen opponents. This way, Thane directed, leading us toward a maintenance hatch I hadn't noticed before. I have a vessel docked in the lower bay. I hesitated. The Corvus is in Upper Dock 6. There is no time, Thane stated flatly. Confederate forces control that section. Lyra squeezed my arm. We'll recover your ship later, she promised. For now we must escape. Reluctantly, I followed Thane into the maintenance shaft, Lyra at my side. We descended rapidly through the station's infrastructure, Thane moving with practiced efficiency through areas that should have been unfamiliar to him. How did you find us? I asked as we paused at a junction to check for pursuit. Va'Sora crystalline formations have unique resonance patterns, Thane explained. Once within range I could sense her presence. You've been tracking me? Lyra asked, sounding troubled. By your father's order, Thane confirmed without apology. After your abduction from the Ark, finding you became priority. I wasn't abducted, Lyra corrected firmly. Rook freed me. Thane's expression remained neutral. A matter for later discussion. We continued downward, eventually emerging into a small private docking bay. An Aetheri scout ship waited, its crystalline hull unlike any vessel I'd seen before, transparent in some sections, opaque in others, with no visible propulsion system. Quickly, Thane urged, opening the ship's entry hatch through some unseen mechanism. I stopped, my instincts warning me to be careful. The Corvus contains the research data. We can't leave without it. Irrelevant, Thane dismissed. Our priority is returning Lyra Va'Sora to her father. Lyra stepped away from both of us. The data is not irrelevant. It contains truth that both our governments have suppressed. A thunderous explosion shook the station, followed by emergency announcements. The Confederate forces were breaching the lower levels. We have no time for this, Thane insisted. Lyra looked between us, her expression conflicted. Finally she turned to me. Go to the Corvus. I will delay the Confederate forces with Thane. We will rendezvous at the coordinates we discussed. Lyra. I began to protest. Trust me, she interrupted, her eyes holding mine. 3 hours. The abandoned navigation relay. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. Before Thane could object, I sprinted toward the maintenance shaft that would take me to the upper levels where the Corvus was docked. The Corvus broke away from Helios Station amid chaos. Confederate vessels were too occupied with the unauthorized departure of an Aetheri scout ship to notice my small craft slipping from an auxiliary docking port. Once clear, I pushed the engines to maximum, setting course for the abandoned navigation relay on the edge of the Callisto Drift. The coordinates Lyra and I had established as an emergency meeting point during our weeks on the station. The relay had been decommissioned years ago when newer navigation technology made it obsolete. Its position, halfway between Confederate and Aetheri space, made it neutral ground claimed by neither side. I arrived first, docking the Corvus to the relay's exterior port. The facility was cold and dark, emergency power maintaining minimal life support and nothing more. I secured the perimeter, treating my shoulder wound with the ship's medical supplies, and waited. 2 hours later, sensors detected an approaching vessel. The Aetheri scout ship materialized with little warning, its quantum drive allowing it to appear with none of the usual FTL signatures. It docked on the opposite side of the relay, from the Corvus. I waited in the central command hub pulse rifle, ready in case this was a trap. When the inner airlock opened, Lyra entered alone, still wearing the disguise she'd had on Helios Station, though the hood was pulled back. Relief flooded through me, stronger than I'd expected. I lowered my weapon and moved toward her. "You're all right?" She nodded, crossing the distance between us quickly. Her crystalline hands found my face, the connection between her biology and my neural implants immediate and welcome. "And you?" "Better now," I admitted. "Thane is securing the ship," she explained, glancing back toward the airlock. "He insisted on accompanying me. I still don't know if I trust him, nor do I fully, but he did help us escape." The airlock cycled again, and Thane entered. He'd removed his outer armor, revealing more of his crystalline structure. Unlike Lyra's flowing, organic formations, his were rigid and geometric, marking him clearly as military caste. "The Confederate vessels have not pursued," he reported. "They appear to believe we left the system." "Good," I acknowledged, keeping my rifle within reach. "Now maybe you can explain why you're here." Thane studied me without warmth. "I was dispatched to recover Lyra Va'Sora following confirmation she survived the destruction of the Confederate research station." "How did you know?" Lyra asked. "Quantum resonance analysis of the debris field," Thane answered. "Your crystalline signature was absent, indicating you had left before the phase-out completed." I remembered how accurately he'd tracked Lyra to Helios Station. "So you've been following us for weeks." "I located Helios Station yesterday," Thane corrected. "Unfortunately, my inquiries alert others to my presence." "Bishop," I guessed. "He followed you to us." Thane inclined his head slightly, the closest thing to an apology I suspected he was capable of. An unintended outcome. Lyra moved to one of the relay's old consoles, her fingers interfacing with the dormant system, bringing it partially back online. "What matters now is our next steps. There is only one appropriate course," Thane stated. "You must return to your father, the Supreme Architect. Our people mourn you, Lyra Va'Sora." "My father mourns me," Lyra corrected gently. "The collective's leadership does not mourn. They calculate the loss of a strategic asset." "You are more than that," Thane insisted, showing the first hint of emotion I'd seen from him. "I know." Lyra's crystal structures pulsed with determination. "Which is why I cannot return. Not yet. Not until the truth is revealed." "What truth?" Thane asked. Lyra looked to me, and I nodded, retrieving the data spike from a secured pocket. "The research from the Ark," I explained, handing it to her. "It proves that humans and Aetheri are biologically compatible, that our species can coexist, even benefit from proximity." Thane's expression hardened. "Impossible. Centuries of conflict have established our fundamental incompatibility." "Centuries of conflict," Lyra countered, "maintained by governments that benefit from division." She interfaced with the console, displaying portions of the research data on the relay's ancient monitors. "See for yourself." Thane studied the information, his crystalline features revealing nothing. After several minutes, he turned to Lyra. "If this is accurate, the implications are significant. It would end the war," I said. "A war that's profited weapons manufacturers and military contractors on both sides while millions died." "Your idealism is misplaced," Thane responded. "Even if this data is genuine, it would be classified immediately. The power structures of both our civilizations are built upon this conflict, which is why we plan to broadcast it publicly, Lyra explained. At the Armistice Day Summit on Nexus Prime, Thane went still, processing this information. Such an action would be considered treason by both governments. Perhaps, Lyra acknowledged, or perhaps it would be the catalyst for genuine peace. I watched their exchange carefully, noticing how Thane's focus remained exclusively on Lyra, as if I were irrelevant to the discussion. You must return with me, Thane finally said. Your father can review this data privately, make determinations about its veracity and implications, and bury it, I interjected. Like both governments have been doing for decades. Thane turned toward me slowly. My orders regarding you are clear, human. What orders? Lyra demanded. To eliminate the Confederate asset who abducted you, Thane stated without inflection. You have been compromised by extended proximity to this human. It affects your judgment. I raised my rifle, aiming at Thane's center mass. Try it. Lyra stepped between us, facing Thane. Rook saved me from Confederate experimentation. He has stood with me when he could have abandoned me. And my judgment is clearer than it has ever been. Thane's crystalline structures darkened. You choose this human over your own people. I choose truth over lies, Lyra answered firmly. I choose a future where our species aren't manipulated into hating each other. If you truly serve the Aetheri people, not just their government, you would choose the same. A tense silence filled the command hub. Thane's posture spoke of training and lethal capability. I kept my weapon ready, knowing I might be outmatched by Aetheri abilities, but unwilling to back down. I have my orders, Thane finally said, and I have made my decision, Lyra responded, her voice carrying the authority of her position. Return to my father, if you must. Tell him I am well. But I will complete this mission before I return to our people. Thane studied her for a long moment, his crystalline eyes unreadable. Then he looked at me. If harm comes to her because of your human crusade, I will find you across any distance. If harm comes to her, I replied evenly, I won't be alive for you to find. Another silence, broken finally by Thane's slight nod. I will report that you remain missing, presumed dead. It will buy you time. He turned back to Lyra. But I will return with sufficient forces to extract you properly. 3 standard weeks is all I can offer. 3 weeks is enough, Lyra said. Thank you, Thane. He moved toward the airlock without further comment. At the threshold he paused. The truth matters more than our separate worlds, he repeated Lyra's words. I hope your conviction proves justified. After he departed, I lowered my rifle, tension draining from my body. That went better than expected. Lyra stepped closer, her crystalline features reflecting the dim emergency lighting. He will return as promised. I know, but by then, it'll be too late to stop us. I reached for her hand, feeling the connection spark between us. Nexus Prime awaits. She interlaced her crystalline fingers with my human ones, the resonance between us strengthening. 2 different worlds, she mused, looking at our joined hands. Perhaps it's time to build a third. The abandoned relay station hung in space around us, a forgotten relic of an earlier age. Like the research data we carried, it represented a past that had been discarded when it no longer served those in power. But unlike the relay, our discovery wouldn't remain abandoned. We had arrived, and the gleaming spires of Nexus Prime stood tall against the amber sky. From our position on the service shuttle, the neutral planet's capital city seemed to shine with possibility. Or perhaps that was just the atmospheric distortion from 3 suns. Final approach to administrative sector, announced the automated voice as our transport dipped beneath the cloud cover. Please prepare identification for security screening. I adjusted the collar of my technician's uniform, the fabric stiff and uncomfortable against my neck. The credentials Maddox had provided identified me as Terran Communications Specialist Adrian Myers, assigned to maintenance of the translation systems for the Armistice Day Summit. Beside me, Lyra appeared perfectly composed in her disguise as cultural liaison assistant Lyra Va'Sora, her crystalline features concealed beneath cosmetics and a head wrap. 3 weeks of planning had brought us to this moment. We'd prepared and memorized the complex layout of the Grand Assembly, where Confederate and Aetheri representatives would meet. "Security checkpoint ahead," I murmured. Sliding my hand across the bench to brush against Lyra's, the contact sent a known tingle through my neural mods. "Ready?" Her eyes met mine briefly. Yes. A simple word that contained volumes of determination. The shuttle docked at the administrative complex's service entrance. 24 technical staff disembarked alongside us, all contracted specialists brought in for the summit. The security screening was rigorous but impersonal. Retinal scans, DNA verification, and quantum signature analysis. All measures Maddox's crafted credentials had been designed to defeat. When the final scanner passed over Lyra, I tensed. The device paused fractionally longer than it had for others. The security officer studied the readout with narrowed eyes. "Unusual signature," he noted. Lyra lowered her eyes demurely. "Genetic therapy for Castle's syndrome. The treatments leave trace radiation." The officer checked something on his datapad. "Medical exemption is noted here. Proceed." We passed through into the service corridors of the assembly building, neither of us showing any reaction until we were safely away from the checkpoint. "That was close," I whispered, as we joined the flow of staff hurrying through the preparation areas. "Not chance," Lyra replied quietly. The scanner was Confederate technology, Bishop's security measures already in place. The mention of Bishop sent a cold trickle down my spine. My former commander had risen rapidly in the ranks after the Ark incident. His face had appeared in briefing materials distributed to all security personnel. His orders regarding Lyra and me remained the same. "Capture the Aetheri specimen, eliminate the traitor. Service hub is this way," I said, consulting my assigned schedule. "We start in Translation Pod 4. Translation pods lined the walls for communication between different species. Our broadcast device had been designed to interface with these pods, using them as conduits to access every communication channel in the assembly simultaneously. For the next hours, we worked our designated shifts, installing legitimate upgrades to the translation software while secretly planting the necessary access points for our transmission. Lyra's crystalline abilities allowed her to interface directly with the systems, leaving no digital fingerprints for security to discover. "Break time," announced a supervisor, checking his schedule. "Myers, Venn, you're relieved for 30 minutes. We made our way to the staff dining area, selecting bland but nutritious meals from the automated dispensers. Finding a quiet corner, we sat with our backs to the wall, positions that allowed us to observe the entire room. "First phase complete," I said softly, pushing my food around the plate while keeping my expression neutral. "Transmission nodes are in place." Lyra nodded slightly. "I've established quantum entanglement with the primary array. Once activated, they cannot block it, conventionally. And the backup position, secure." I verified access to the service tunnels beneath the East Assembly Wing. Our contingency plan: if discovered before the broadcast, we'd retreat to a maintenance junction near the assembly hall, where we'd prepared a secondary transmission setup, less elegant than using the official systems, but sufficient to accomplish our goal. Movement at the entrance caught my attention. A squad of security officers entered, their uniforms marking them as Confederate rather than neutral Nexus Prime forces. They moved with purpose, scanning ID badges and faces as they circulated through the room. "Routine check," I said, maintaining a casual tone despite the tension building in my chest. Lyra questioned, her eyes tracking the officer's systematic movement. As the security team approached our section, one of them received a message through his earpiece. His eyes immediately locked onto our table. I reached beneath the table, my fingers finding Lyra's hand just as the officer raised his arm, pointing directly at us. "Security alert," announced a voice over the facility's communication system. "All personnel remain at your stations for identity verification." "Time to go," I whispered. We rose simultaneously, abandoning our meals and moving swiftly toward the service corridor. Behind us, shouts erupted as the security team pushed through the crowded dining area. We broke into a run as we entered the corridor. All pretense of belonging abandoned. "This way," Lyra urged, pulling me toward a maintenance access panel. Her fingers interfaced with the electronic lock, crystalline structures extending into the mechanism. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage between walls. We squeezed inside just as the first security officers rounded the corner. The maintenance space was cramped and dark. We crawled through the constricted passage, dust and cables brushing against our faces. "How did they identify us?" Lyra asked as we navigated the labyrinth of service ducts. "Someone recognized me, I guessed. Or the deeper security scans finally flagged your physiology." We emerged from the maintenance space into a lower-level corridor, used for waste management. The lighting here was dimmer. The floors utilitarian rather than decorative. "The broadcast system," Lyra said, her voice tight with concern. "If they've identified us, they'll be checking all the translation pods." I finished her thought. "We need to access our backup." We ran toward the eastern sector, using service passages, to avoid the security teams now swarming through the main corridors. Alarm systems blared intermittently, but the facility's managers seemed reluctant to trigger a full lockdown that would disrupt the summit preparations. At a junction between sectors, we encountered a trio of maintenance workers. They looked up in surprise as we burst through the access door. "Security alert," one of them said, reaching for his communicator. "You shouldn't be." I moved quickly, delivering a precise strike that rendered him unconscious before he could complete the call. The other two backed away, raising their hands. "We don't want trouble," the older of the two said. "Whatever you're running from, we need access to the East Assembly Service corridor," I interrupted. "Key card." The woman hesitated, then slowly reached for the badge clipped to her belt. "Look, I've got 3 kids. I just work here. We're not going to hurt you," Lyra assured her, stepping forward and lowering the scarf that partially covered her face. The maintenance worker's eyes widened as they glimpsed her crystalline features. "You're Aetheri," the woman whispered. "Yes, and what we're doing may finally end the war between our people." Lyra extended her hand. "Please," after a moment's hesitation, the woman unclipped her badge and placed it in Lyra's palm. "East Service Corridor is through the recycling center, 3rd hatch on the left." "Thank you," Lyra said. I secured the unconscious worker with cable ties I found in a nearby toolbox. "He'll wake up with a headache, nothing more. Stay here for 15 minutes. Then you can report this." The woman nodded. "My brother died in the Proxima conflict. If you can really end this war, that's the plan," I said, turning to leave. "Wait," called the younger worker, who had remained silent until now. "Security's activated biometric checkpoints at all major junctions. That badge won't get you past them." "Any way around?" I asked. He hesitated, then pulled up a schematic on his maintenance pad. "Atmospheric circulation system. It's tight, but it bypasses the checkpoints." The woman pointed to an access panel near the floor. "That'll get you in. Follow the main trunk line east, and good luck." We entered the ventilation system, a maze of ducts and filters that carried processed air throughout the facility. The space was even more confined than the maintenance passage had been, forcing us to crawl on our stomachs in some sections. My shoulder, still not fully healed from heliostation, protested with each movement. "Security systems are escalating," Lyra observed as announcements repeated through the ducts. "Full delegate arrival has been delayed. They're conducting a sweep." "Bishop knows we're here," I said grimly. "He knows what we're planning." We continued through the ventilation system, navigating by the schematics the maintenance worker had shown us. After 20 minutes of uncomfortable progress, we reached the exit point near the East Assembly Service area. I peered through the grate. The corridor appeared empty, but security cameras tracked along the ceiling. "We'll have seconds before we're spotted." Lyra placed her hand against the wall beside the vent, crystalline fingers extending into the surface. "Disrupting camera feed. Now." I kicked the grate open and we dropped into the corridor, immediately sprinting toward the maintenance junction where we'd prepared our backup transmission setup. The door was locked with an electronic seal that Lyra quickly overrode. The maintenance junction was a small room filled with communication relays and power distribution nodes. In a corner concealed beneath maintenance tarps was our secondary broadcast device, a modified transmitter connected to a portable quantum interface of Lyra's design. "How long until the cameras come back online?" I asked, securing the door behind us. "Approximately 3 minutes," Lyra answered. "Already uncovering the equipment. The system will flag the disruption though. Security will investigate." I checked my chronometer. The primary delegation meeting begins in 40 minutes. We need to be ready to broadcast when all representatives are assembled. Lyra connected herself to the broadcast device, crystal structures extending into the machine, initializing quantum alignment. The broadcast data is intact. I positioned myself near the door, pulse pistol ready. "Once we start, how long until the transmission reaches every system?" 30 seconds for full propagation, she said, her concentration focused on the interface. "But we'll need to maintain the connection for at least 2 minutes to ensure the complete data package transfers." 2 minutes. An eternity when security forces would be converging on our position. "Almost ready," Lyra announced. Final calibrations. The door exploded inward in a shower of metal fragments. I dove for cover as Confederate security forces poured through the opening, weapon fire illuminating the dim room with deadly flashes. "Protect the transmitter," I shouted, returning fire from behind a power junction box. Lyra raised her hand, crystalline structures glowing brilliantly, as she generated a gravitational distortion field. The incoming fire bent around her, plasma bolts curving harmlessly into the walls. I took advantage of the momentary protection to pick my targets carefully. 3 shots, 3 security officers down, but more pressed forward, their tactics disciplined and coordinated. "Hold position," ordered a familiar voice from the corridor outside. "Let me through." The security team parted as Commander Bishop stepped into the doorway. His uniform now carried the additional insignia of his new rank, but his face remained the same, hard lines and cold determination. His cybernetic eye glowed blue as it fixed on us. "Garrett," he acknowledged, his voice neutral despite the circumstances. "Still choosing the wrong side, I see." I kept my weapon trained on him. "The only side I'm choosing is truth, Bishop. Something you've been helping suppress for years." His expression didn't change. "Truth is relative, soldier. What matters is security, stability." His artificial eye shifted to Lyra. "Surrender the Aetheri specimen now, and your death will be quick. Continue this foolishness, and I promise you'll watch her dissection personally. You're really devoted to this war, aren't you?" I said, trying to buy time as Lyra continued her preparations behind me. "What happens when people learn it's all been a lie? That humans and Aetheri are compatible?" Bishop's mouth twitched slightly. "Compatible? Such a simplistic view. What matters isn't whether we can coexist, it's whether we should." He stepped further into the room, his officers flanking him with weapons ready. "Peace makes us vulnerable, Garrett. Conflict keeps us strong, vigilant, advancing. War drives innovation. It also drives profit," I countered. "For people like you who build careers on bodies, enough philosophy." Bishop snapped, his patience evaporating. "Take them." The security team surged forward just as Lyra called out, "Ready." I fired repeatedly, forcing Bishop and his men back momentarily. "Start the broadcast." Lyra's crystalline structures flared with brilliant light as she fully connected with the transmitter. The device buzzed to life, quantum fields expanding around it. Bishop recognized what was happening. "Stop her," he shouted, raising his own weapon. I threw myself between Bishop and Lyra, continuing to fire. One of his officers went down, but another flanked around, getting a clear shot at Lyra. The plasma bolt struck her in the side before I could intercept it. She cried out, her concentration wavering as pain disrupted her connection. "Lyra," I turned toward her, my focus broken for just an instant. It was enough. Bishop's shot caught me in the leg, searing through muscle and dropping me to one knee. Pain exploded through my nervous system. as my neural mods struggled to suppress it. Disable the transmitter. Bishop ordered his remaining men as he approached, weapon trained on my head. It's too late, I said through gritted teeth, looking up at him defiantly. The broadcast has already begun. Behind me, Lyra had reconnected with the device despite her injury. 30 seconds, she gasped, her voice strained. Just hold them. Bishop's cybernetic eye narrowed as he processed this information. Kill them both, he decided. Destroy the equipment. His men moved to comply, but I wasn't finished. I launched myself at Bishop, tackling him to the ground. His weapon discharged, the shot going wide as we crashed into the wall. We grappled frantically. My combat training matched against his cybernetic enhancements. His artificial strength gave him the advantage, allowing him to throw me off and regain his footing. You always were second-rate, Garrett, he sneered, raising his weapon. A soldier who couldn't follow orders. A mercenary, without the stomach for what the job requires. Blood leaked from my wounded leg, but I forced myself upright. Maybe, but at least I can see the bigger picture. This war ends today, Bishop, with or without us. The maintenance junctions suddenly flooded with brilliant light as Lyra channeled more power into the broadcast. On a monitor beside the transmitter, I could see the feed being distributed. Research data, biological compatibility statistics, records of deliberate suppression by both governments. Transmission at 60%, Lyra announced, her voice weak but determined. Every screen in the assembly hall, every communication device, Bishop's face contorted with rage. He spun toward Lyra, weapon raised. Then you die first, specimen. I didn't think. I moved. Throwing myself forward, I intercepted Bishop's aim as he fired. The plasma bolt meant for Lyra struck me squarely in the chest, the impact hurling me backward. I collapsed against the transmitter, pain unlike anything I'd experienced flooding every nerve. Through blurring vision, I saw Lyra's expression transform from determination to horror. Rook, she cried, her free hand reaching toward me while the other maintained the broadcast connection. Bishop stepped forward, weapon charging for a second shot, touching, but futile. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Lyra's crystalline structures flared with light, more intense than I'd ever witnessed. Her eyes changed from violet to pure radiant silver. The gravitational field she generated expanded explosively, no longer just deflecting weapons fire, but suspending everything in the room. Bishop froze mid-step, his body lifted slightly off the floor. His security team hung suspended in various positions, their weapons rendered useless by the gravitational distortion. Equipment, debris, even the dust in the air, all stopped in perfect stillness. Only Lyra moved, disconnecting from the transmitter now that the broadcast was complete. She crossed to where I lay, the gravitational field parting around her like water. Worth it, I whispered as she knelt beside me, my voice barely audible through the pain. Tell me, it worked, she confirmed, crystalline tears forming at the corners of her eyes. The data is broadcasting throughout the assembly. Both delegations are seeing everything. She placed her hands on my chest, her crystal structures extending into my wound. I felt a strange tingling sensation, replacing the pain. What are you? I began. Temporary stasis, she explained, her concentration intense, suspending the damaged tissue until proper medical intervention is possible. Through the haze of pain and the wonder of Lyra's abilities, I became aware of new voices in the corridor outside, the sounds of conflict, orders being given, but not in human language. Aetheri forces surged into the room, their crystalline armor gleaming. They hesitated at the sight before them. A human security team suspended in midair, a wounded human on the floor, and Lyra Va'Sora, daughter of the Supreme Architect, maintaining a gravitational field that should have been impossible. Secure the area, ordered a voice of authority. A tall figure stepped through the Aetheri security forces. The resemblance to Lyra was unmistakable, though his crystalline structures were more complex than hers. The Supreme Architect, her father, moved into the maintenance junction, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "Lyra," he said, his voice resonant with harmonics. She didn't look up from where she knelt beside me. "Father, you've seen the broadcast." "I have." He regarded the suspended Confederate forces, Bishop among them, as has everyone attending the summit. "Then you know the truth." "Lyra. The suppression." "Yes." The Supreme Architect moved closer, observing her gravitational manipulation, with what appeared to be wonder. "Your abilities have evolved. Bioharmonic resonance adaptation," she explained, still not taking her eyes off me. "Proximity to compatible human neural patterns. The very compatibility our governments denied." The Supreme Architect knelt on my other side, examining me with analytical attention. "This human, he is significant to you." "His name is Rook," Lyra answered. "And he nearly died to bring truth to both our peoples." Her silver eyes finally lifted to meet her father's. "He is proof of what could be, rather than what has been." The Supreme Architect studied me for a long moment, then made a gesture to the Aetheri security forces. "Bring the medical team. Both are physicians and human doctors." As consciousness began to slip away from me, I heard the Supreme Architect speak once more to his daughter. "The truth you've revealed cannot be undone, Lyra. Both our civilizations face a reckoning with history today." Lyra's voice followed me into darkness. "Then let us build something better from it." I awoke in a medical facility unlike any I'd seen before. The architecture blended human and Aetheri design philosophies, clean lines and practical equipment alongside crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. "The patient is conscious," announced a human doctor, approaching my bed. I tried to sit up, memories flooding back. "Lyra? Where's I'm here?" Her voice came from beside me. She sat in a chair next to the bed, her crystalline features gleaming in the room's soft light. "How long?" I asked, noting that the pain in my chest had dulled to a manageable ache. 3 days, she answered, reaching to take my hand. The known connection formed immediately, comforting and energizing. The plasma wound was severe, but the combined expertise of human and Aetheri medicine proved quite effective. I looked around the room, noticing details I'd missed initially. The view through the window showed not a planet's surface but stars against darkness. "We're in space," Lyra nodded. "Aboard the Harmony, a joint medical vessel commissioned for the summit, the first of its kind." "The broadcast?" I asked. "Memories of our mission resurfacing. Complete success," she confirmed, crystal structures brightening with what I'd learned to recognize as pride. The data could not be contained or denied. Both delegations were forced to acknowledge the decades of suppression. "Bishop?" Her expression darkened slightly. "In custody, awaiting trial for numerous violations of interspecies law. Many of his colleagues have turned against him, trading information for leniency." I processed this information, feeling strangely disconnected from the victory we'd achieved. "What happens now?" "Now." Lyra smiled, the expression transforming her already beautiful features. "Now we begin the work of building rather than destroying." She helped me sit up, adjusting the medical bed to support my position. From this angle, I could see more of the space outside, a massive space station under construction, its design unlike anything in Confederate or Aetheri space. "What is that?" I asked, gesturing toward the window. "The first cooperative research outpost," Lyra explained, "established in the neutral zone as a joint scientific endeavor." Her crystal structures pulsed with gentle light. "My father has appointed me as the Aetheri representative to oversee the project." "Quite a promotion from escaped specimen," I observed. "The Harmony Initiative, they're calling it," she continued. "Dedicated to exploring the biological compatibility we proved exists between our species." I studied her face, finding serenity there that hadn't been present during our weeks of running and hiding. "You seem at peace with this." "I am." She moved from the chair to sit on the edge of the bed, closer to me. "For the first time, I'm neither defined by my father's position, nor by being a captive. I'm simply myself." "And who is that?" I asked softly. I'm still discovering the answer. Her eyes met mine, silver now dominant over violet. But I know I wish to continue that discovery with you nearby. The door opened before I could respond, admitting the Supreme Architect. He moved with purpose, his crystalline structures more complex than any Aetheri I'd seen, glowing with subtle power. Rook Garrett, he acknowledged, approaching the bed. Your recovery progresses well. Thanks to your medical team, I replied cautiously, uncertain of my standing with Lyra's father. Our medical team, he corrected mildly. The integration of human and Aetheri medical knowledge has proven remarkably effective. The first of many such collaborations, I expect. He turned to Lyra. The preliminary agreement has been finalized. Both councils have approved the resource allocation for the outpost. That's excellent news, Father, Lyra responded, her formality suggesting their relationship remained complicated despite recent events. The Supreme Architect returned his attention to me. The Confederate Council has posthumously dropped all charges against you, Garrett. Posthumously? I raised an eyebrow. Officially, you died during the incident at the Ark Research Station, he explained. A convenient fiction that allows certain elements within the Confederate military to save face while the broader peace process advances. So I'm a dead man, I said, processing the implications. Legally, yes. Practically, he made a gesture that seemed equivalent to a human shrug. You are free to begin again, perhaps with a different identity. I glanced at Lyra, who watched this exchange with careful attention. And what role do you envision for a dead mercenary in this new era of cooperation? The Supreme Architect's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. Security consultant to the Harmony Initiative would be an appropriate position, given your unique qualifications. After he departed, Lyra and I sat in contemplative silence. Through the window, construction vessels moved around the developing outpost, human and Aetheri craft, working in coordinated patterns. So, I finally said, security consultant. If you wish, Lyra replied. Though I would understand if you preferred to take your freedom elsewhere. The charges against you have been dropped. Your obligation is complete. I reached for her hand, feeling the now familiar resonance between us. Do you know what I've learned after all this, running, fighting, and nearly dying? She tilted her head questioningly. Home isn't about location, I said. It's about where you feel you belong. I squeezed her hand gently. And somehow, against all logic and history, I belong with you. The crystals along her face brightened with emotion. The first of many cross-species partnerships. She quoted her father's words, but with personal meaning. Perhaps, she agreed, leaning forward to rest her forehead against mine. The connection between us strengthening with proximity. We have time to discover what that means. Through the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the momentous changes occurring among the civilizations that traveled between them. But on the nascent outpost, taking shape before us, something new was beginning. Something neither human nor Aetheri, but a genuine synthesis of both. My neural mods tingled pleasantly, as Lyra's crystalline biology harmonized with them. Our unique connection, a living embodiment of the compatibility we'd fought to reveal. Bishop had been wrong. Peace didn't make us vulnerable. It made us stronger through union rather than division. Worth it, I whispered, echoing my words from the confrontation that seemed so distant now. Lyra's silver eyes met mine, understanding flowing between us without need for further speech. Worth everything, she said.